Yeah, so again, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us at our Winter Employer Forum for employers of CIPFA students. So we've got a few updates this afternoon, but then hopefully we'll have plenty of time for you to be able to ask questions. You can either put those in the chat box as we go, and so we'll come to questions and pause sort of after each section, and then allow time for questions at the end. And you can, if you want to, you can just put your hand up and I can unmute you, or alternatively put your question in the chat box and we can read those questions out. So I'm going to give an update just on the new exam system. It's the first time we use the new exam system for the first couple of exams in December. Sarah's going to give an update on our training. Helen is going to give an update on apprenticeships, and then I'm just going to give a reminder on our enrolment deadlines, and then we can open up for a general discussion. Okay, so we launched our new exam system just for the first two exams, management accounting and financial accounting, in the December exams. And so I'm pleased to report that out of the 410 examinations that students took in December for the first two exams, there was only 4 student-related issues, device issues, and they were related to the students' devices. So we are going to be sending out a survey to those students in terms of their experience, but as far as our examinations team concerned, that was a successful outcome. So what we will be doing is we will continue to offer management accounting and financial accounting exams via the new ROGO system in March, and then there will be a full rollout for all examinations in June, and so the exams team are busy working towards that rollout, and so there will be more detailed instructions going out to students probably in April, well ahead of the new exam system launch, and they'll get plenty of time, opportunities to practice on the new system. So that's really, as well as that, we're also testing the back office system, which is the marking system for those exams that need human marking, and also reviewing the arrangements for invigilation. So that was really just the quick update for the exams system. So then just moving swiftly on, Sarah, do you want to then give an update regarding training?
Thanks, David, and hello, everyone. I think I've probably said this enough times now, but for anyone who might be new, hello, and I'm Sarah Shrews, Head of Training Services at CIPFA, so I'm ultimately responsible for all of our delivery within CETC. Just wanted to take the time today to give you some feedback on the student survey that we deployed to both, sorry, I should say the survey that we deployed to both students and employers in the autumn term. So last employer forum, I think we trailed that the surveys would be deployed, and I think then I promised to come back and give you an overview of the feedback that we received. So just wanted to focus really on talking you through some of the results that we got from those surveys. So next slide, please, David. As you'll see, we had a reasonable number of student responses. We had 246 and 24 employer responses. Now, in the main, the survey was designed to focus on sort of helping us with data on preferences for face-to-face classes versus kind of preferences for web classes, and to dig a little deeper into, for those who prefer face-to-face, the preferred locations, so that we could be using this data in our timetabling and our planning. Also asking questions about the duration and frequency of web classes, and if that's right, or whether we should be kind of looking to make some adjustments. And we also took the opportunity to ask for qualitative feedback on things that students and employers particularly liked about their study with CIPFA, and things that they perhaps liked a bit less or might like to see less of, or where they might like to see some change, or just things that they wanted to let us know. Really pleased to say we got absolutely loads of kind of narrative feedback from students, and that's been really, really helpful. Lots of, I'm going to come on to it in a moment, but lots of really positive things, but lots of food for thought as well. If people want to see the results of the survey, including the kind of the data splits, but also all of the narrative feedback, then I would be really happy to share that. So next slide, please, David. Thank you. So in relation to the student survey, we asked them how they would most like to study, so their preferences on modality. And we took out, to show these results here, those students who provided a kind of neutral or no preference, don't mind kind of response. And you can see that if we take those out, that we're left with about 1/3 preferring face-to-face and 2/3 preferring web class. Obviously, we know that we need to sort of bear in mind when we look at these results that it could be that some students are expressing a preference for web class because they don't believe that there's a face-to-face option close to them. So we kind of, take that into account when we have a look at these, but interesting headlines nonetheless. Next slide, please, David. So then we asked students about the strength of feeling in relation to face-to-face or web class. So if someone was expressing a preference for web classes, how strong was that, or vice versa. And I guess here the surprise is the fairly high number feeling strongly against face-to-face. That was quite a surprise to us. And how few students felt very strongly against web classes. But again, we do need to bear in mind that some of the kind of strongly for web classes or strongly against face-to-face feelings could be due to the expectation that they'd have to travel long distances for a face-to-face class. Having said that, the narrative comments that we got did bear out an awful lot of appreciation for the flexibility and the convenience of web classes and the ability to watch the recording of your class afterwards. But yeah, some interesting data there, I think, on the kind of strength of feeling. Next slide, please, David. And then we sort of dug deeper into, we asked the students who expressed a strong preference for face-to-face where they would like to study. Now, obviously, as you can see, there's a proportionately kind of the highest number in London by quite a long way. We'll keep monitoring and we'll keep putting face-to-face classes on where there is demand, but obviously, I'm sure you'll understand we do need to have minimum numbers. We will definitely have more students who will book for face-to-face than just these in spring, and so you'll see in a few slides' time that we factored that into our spring term planning. But I guess on this slide, the most important or interesting thing to look at are the proportions rather than the numbers themselves, because we know we'll have more people booking for face-to-face, but certainly a very high preponderance of students in London and the other locations do make it difficult for us to timetable face-to-face classes, because obviously we need minimum numbers for a particular module. So we might have 13 students in Manchester, but they could potentially be doing 12 different modules. But we are improving our data capture in relation to preferences and hopefully putting on classes where we do have that critical mass. I'll come back to that in a moment. Next slide, please, David. So in relation to employer views on the modality of study, so this is specifically relating to our employer survey that you'll remember we had 24 responses for. Whilst we have much lower numbers here, but you can see that the proportions are reversed in relation to student views. So here we have 2/3 of employers having a preference for face-to-face and 1/3 preferring web, and those preferring face-to-face do seem to have a very strong preference to it. similarly to students. Again, you can see the predominance of London in the location preference. But I guess an issue we have is that if we've got this sort of reverse issue where 2/3 of employers prefer their students study face-to-face versus 1/3 of students, we look at the bottom table and we have very few employers who mandate how students study. So that's obviously not a problem, of course, that's entirely your choice. But it does mean, I guess, that students may well book their course relative to their preference rather than to that of their employer. So probably just worth bearing in mind in those conversations that you're having with your students. Next slide, please, David. We just took the opportunity whilst we were surveying to ask about the frequency and duration of web classes. So focusing specifically on web classes, asking students whether they would prefer something a bit different, either fewer sessions, shorter sessions, more sessions. But as you can see, there's a strong desire to keep things as they are, i.e. mostly all-day sessions with the same number of classes per module. But we will maintain the option for half-day courses for those who prefer that. The numbers in the graph are for students, but employers answered in pretty much exactly the same proportions. Just for transparency, we also asked students to give us their preferences in relation to how they'd like to receive their workbooks, because all UK students are sent hard copy workbooks, and they also get them a soft copy. We occasionally get a student saying, I really don't want to have these in hard copy, it's a waste of cost and resource to send them to me. So we just wanted to sense check what we were doing. The very, very strong preference was to continue as we are, so students receiving hard copy by post with a soft copy being available on CIPFA Learning. So no plans to change that. That sort of endorsed our thinking. Next slide, please, David. And then we also took the opportunity, as those of you who attended the last Employer Forum will remember, we rolled out our new virtual learning environment and CIPFA Learning platform last term to all students. Very pleased to say it seemed to go with very few hitches, and students are finding it very easy to use, nice and intuitive, and those satisfaction scores kind of bear that out, where 10 was for students who are extremely satisfied and 1 being not at all satisfied. So that's good to see. Next slide, please, David. As I say, we did get a very large volume of verbatim comments. We asked students to let us know things that they particularly like about their studies with CIPFA and what they might like to see more of, and what they perhaps don't like so much about their study with CIPFA and what they might like to see less of. Really, really interesting, but I suppose inevitably at times conflicting in relation to what people like and what they like less. And so, what is borne out is we're clearly not going to be able to please all of the people all of the time, but we will aim to ensure that there are enough options for the way that people study, for example, to ensure that we can please as many people as possible. So in relation to face-to-face versus web class, obviously we will continue to review the data and review preferences and aim to kind of supply to demand, I guess. Lots of helpful comment in relation to interactivity in the web classes, but some very mixed comments, with some people very, very happy with the levels of interactivity, others wanting more, others saying it's good as it is. Very mixed feelings about breakout rooms. As many people who actually picked that out as the one thing that they wanted to comment on about what they like about web classes were balanced by people saying that they don't like them either. So we're taking that back to trainers to kind of discuss. It may be that breakout rooms work best in particular modules and less well in others, or it requires a bit more guidance from the trainers. So we're taking that back. A lot of positivity for tutorials, and an awful lot of comment on it was particularly, I suppose, the ability to review the recordings. So, we do load the recordings of the web classes onto the VLE, and for people who are attending a face-to-face class, they will get a recording of a previous web class. And that seems to be very much valued by students who we know do take the time to go back into the recordings, use them for revision, use them for clarification. So there's certainly a lot of positivity around that, and a lot of comment on the convenience of web classes. And students, some were commenting, for example, it's not just about being able to sort of log on at 9:30, but that they would be using what they would have been spending, the time that they would have been spending on travel, that they're using to start earlier on, working on the materials, reviewing the previous learning, preparing for the day, etc. So there was a lot of comment for that. Equally, though, the people who were picking out positive comment on face-to-face were very, 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 very pro in relation to their feelings about face-to-face, and saying that they find that an awful lot easier and better as a learning experience. So I think horses for courses is really what we're taking out of this. Next slide, please, David. So finally, in relation to spring 23 options that you may have already seen if you've been looking at the timetable online, but we are maintaining what we did last term with a few more options, in fact. So all modules that we are delivering will have at least one face-to-face option in London, with the exception of DSDA, where numbers booking onto that module and data about preferences suggest that we need to have 2 face-to-face cohorts in London. So that's what we're doing there. And then SPF and SCS are also having a face-to-face option in Manchester. I repeat what I've said before, which is that we do want to be demand-led. We would obviously love to be able to provide face-to-face in every location where there's demand, but it really just isn't commercially viable for us to be delivering a face-to-face course for 2 students for a particular module in locations other than those that are listed on this, other than London and Manchester. So we're listening, we are talking to students, we'll probably deploy another survey. We've used the results from the survey where students have expressed a preference for face-to-face and where they would like to travel. We've put that into their record so that we can be pulling out reports to be supporting our timetabling. And as I say, we do want to be demand-led, but that's what's on the table for spring 23, and we'll be using feedback and data to be planning hopefully a sensible range of courses for the autumn term. Very happy to take questions.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I think if we perhaps just pause now and see if there are any questions. So Martin's got a question. Is there a reason why Sheffield has been removed from face-to-face provision, as was previously the case? Neither Manchester or London are convenient for my students, particularly with issues around reliable rail travel. My students did not receive a survey, so this feedback is new.
So all students had access to the survey because it was on every single student has a CIPFA learning account, and the survey was put front and center onto the page that they would click into to access all of their learning. And we did ask all trainers to ask students to complete the survey, and if possible to give them time in the day to actually complete it. So I'm sorry that your students didn't know about it, Martin, but I'm pretty confident that they would have had access to completing it. In relation to why Sheffield has been removed from face-to-face, I don't think we've had a course in Sheffield for a little while. As I say, we're definitely open to running a course in Sheffield, but we would need to know that we've got the numbers for a particular module. What we often have is 20 students in a particular location, for example, who are expressing a strong preference for face-to-face, but between them they might be doing 10 different modules. So that's the issue we've got. If we've got a critical mass of students doing a module in an area, then we'll absolutely look at putting on a putting on a face-to-face course. I hope that answers your question, but please do feel free to switch your mic on if you like, or comment again.
Thanks, Martin, and thanks, Sarah, for the reply. Amin has said something similar about students not seeing the survey. So perhaps when we do the next survey, Sarah, we just need to look at.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, Amina, and obviously that bears out what Martin says. I can't think that we can make it any more central in terms of where they log in. And we did ask our trainers again and again behind the scenes to be asking students, I mean, multiple times. And I know that that request did get passed on. I can only promise that we'll look at how else we can communicate that there is a survey open to students.
Yeah, and when we did, I think we did talk about, Sarah, even just allowing 5 minutes, maybe over a team, something during a class to actually get all students at a particular time to go and answer the survey, because the more feedback we get, obviously, the better.
And I can't obviously guarantee that happened in every class, but I know that it happened in a lot.
Just before I just go over Julie's question about the exam system, Bethany's just asked what are the minimum numbers needed to put a course on in a particular location?
Ideally, we'd be looking at 10, Bethany.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. And obviously, Bethany, if there's a particular location and you know your students do just let us know where that location is. But obviously, we want to be able to build up our own information of where students are in terms of our bookings. So Julie, just asking about new exam system, are students still required for testing? Good question. I know they're doing lots of testing on the full rollout, so I'll speak to the exams team about that, Julie, and then come back to you, or put a note in the follow-up to this about anyone that have student volunteers for the testing. So thank you, Julie, for that. I mean, it's just CIPFA consider pushing back the exam dates to week 3 of the month. They always seem to clash with month-end reporting deadlines. So that's not something that, so that's handled by our colleagues that on the professional body side. I don't know if Helen or Sarah have any kind of comments about the exam dates, and we do set them a year in advance so that people can book them. But I take the point about it always being kind of month end.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? It feels to some extent wherever CIPFA put them would cause a problem somewhere. I suppose my immediate thought with the 3rd week of any month is that's then perilously close to Christmas for the December sitting. So pros and cons always, aren't there? It's something we'd have to pass over to Anna, but it would be quite a seismic shift to move exam dates, wouldn't it?
Yeah, what does everyone else feel about that? Is that something that lots of people would welcome? Perhaps we can come back to that, and maybe it's something what I can do. I know Anna's doing something with the students on the exam system, but maybe we can ask students as well. But as Helen said, it's you'll never please everyone on exam dates, but I fully understand about the month end. Yes, there are, Laura. Because of the rollout of the new syllabus, essentially exemptions were kind of starting again. But I will just, again, in the update that we send from this, I'll find out where we are about the new exams, the new exemptions webpage. And was there anything else more we want to talk about in terms of exemptions for these are all enrollments for new students?
Yeah, so the apprenticeship team have been talking in depth with the CIPFA, the Institute side, regarding exemptions, because we do recognise it's complicated actually, and particularly where perhaps people come with finance and accounting degrees, and the website has previously given an indication of what the exemptions would be for that degree. Those are, I guess they need reviewing anyway, just because university syllabuses change, courses get updated. They are only ever going to be indicative, but I am very aware that some of them do feel perhaps a bit outdated and don't give a very clear indication of the exemptions that would be available to an individual learner, and particularly then when that maps across to the new CIPFA Futures rollout. The apprenticeship team do try to give very clear guidance to learners. So as part of the enrolment process, the apprenticeship team will take all the syllabus details from an applicant and pass them across to CIPFA for the exemptions decision. And that decision will then come back to the applicant and the team. And we will always try and talk through in detail at that point what those exemptions are that are available and what that means for what the individual learning plan should look like. Because the other thing I would say, and I think we've said this consistently for a long time with the apprenticeship model, is access to an exam exemption doesn't necessarily mean that we would recommend taking something out of a learning plan anyway. So I guess, you know, the one that we've talked about most in the past has been CFR leading into PSFR, you know, restudying those prior modules before you hit the more difficult components of the syllabus has always been something that we would advocate for, to make sure that someone is properly prepared for the modules that follow on. So I think while that updating process happens, all I can realistically offer is that we will keep engaging in those conversations. And if there's any doubt, any confusion or complexity with an applicant, please just get them to jump on a call with us and we'll talk through what that means sensibly for a learning plan.
Thanks, Helen, and thanks for the question. Yeah, and there's another just thing about there's whatever time we put the exams, there's kind of no lulls in the year. Amin has just asked about encouraging students to register for their next exam before the results of the previous one. So you can absolutely wait for your results before you book for the next exams. The exam window doesn't close until after the results from the previous exam sitting have been published. But they open them earlier because obviously not everyone is waiting for a set of exam results before they book their next one. So for example, the June sitting, not everyone is taking an exam in March.
Yeah, so I think for the sitting for this time, the results will be coming out on Thursday. The exam booking window for the March exams then goes through to, I think, the 5th of February. So there's a reasonable amount of time to process the results that you've got, and in the case of apprentices, to have a conversation with the team about what that means for what needs booking next.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. And Catherine just saying something similar about there's never going to be a good date to have exams. Right, okay, I think we'll move on. Thank you for those questions, and do keep the questions coming. So now just going to pass over to Helen to give an update on apprenticeships. Helen.
Fantastic. Thank you, David. So I think most of you know me, but I am the apprenticeship delivery manager. So look after everything through from the enrolments and the application stage through to endpoint assessment. I think in terms of the things that we were planning to cover, we have touched on quite a few of them already in the questions that have come up. But the next big event this week, I guess, is the exam results, which are released on Thursday of this week, the 19th of January. So we are braced for the release of those results, and we'll do all of the usual things. We'll make sure that apprentices, work-based learning coaches are updated of the results that their individual apprentices get at the end of Thursday, but the students can look up their own result on the CIPFA system from first thing on Thursday morning. Obviously, this leads into what we are then booking apprentices onto for the spring 23 term. So your apprentices will already have received an email from the apprenticeship team, which sets out for them the tuition courses that we are expecting to book them on for spring 2023 based on their learning plan. So for the apprentices, all of the tuition is booked by the apprenticeship team. They don't self-serve the booking. That's in part because obviously it's not then invoiced, it's covered by the apprenticeship levy, but it also makes sure that the apprentices are sticking to the plan that we have for them. So we've sent out those emails. We have highlighted to them the module or modules that we are expecting them to study in the spring term. And we've asked them about the group that they would like to be booked onto. We keep in our learner management system a record of how the students like to study. So whether that's face-to-face in London, whether that's web groups, whether they have preferences over that. We have also put in that email what I hope is a really clear request to them to let us know if the modality of study that we have got recorded for them in the learner management system, if they would like to change that. So if they have been in the habit of having web classes, because that is what was available to them during COVID and during lockdown, but actually they would have a preference for a face-to-face course if it were available in their geographical area, then we are recording that information. We're entering that into our learner management system, and what the team are therefore looking out for are opportunities, as Sarah said, to identify areas where we have got a critical mass of apprentices doing the same module in the same geographical area, and that information would then really promptly get fed back to the tuition team. So I would take that back to our resources manager, Joe, and we would see if we had a critical mass of students who wanted to study face-to-face in any particular area, if we could make that happen. And we absolutely have done that previously with SCS in Sheffield. We would do it again if we had enough students, enough apprentices who wanted to study in a particular area. So we're on the lookout for that. So I guess from your point of view, do encourage your apprentices to let the team know, rather than just, accept what's in that email as we're assuming we're booking you on a web class for this. If that's not actually what they want, or indeed if that's not what you would like, then do let us know that. We are capturing that data and we are reviewing it. Also in that email is a reminder to the apprentices that they need to be moving forward the other parts of their apprenticeship in parallel with their tuition courses and their examination passes. So there's a phrase in there that says, this is the tuition plan subject to us seeing in Smart Assessor that you're moving forward your off-the-job training and your work experience portfolio. That's nothing new, it's nothing different. It's as laid out in the handbook that, the model of an apprenticeship is that all of these things need to be moving forward in conjunction with each other. If we are seeing in Smart Assessor that apprentices are falling behind with retaining their off-the-job training record or keeping their portfolio entries moving forward, then we will have a conversation with them about whether we need to be rethinking learning plans, whether they are actually coping with the level of study and the development of work experience and portfolio alongside that. But it's not that we're expecting them to do anything different. It's that, the expectation is that for an apprenticeship, all of these things move forward together. There's Liam, you're saying, can employers be copied in these emails to apprentices? You'd find that really useful. It is different now to when you were doing it, that's true. We don't tend to copy line managers in, I guess in part because in lots of your organisations, those do actually change. So it wouldn't be impossible for us to extract the data to copy the manager who is currently in Smart Assessor. I guess the only thing that would need some thinking about is that for lots of organisations that wouldn't necessarily still be the right person that we were sending that email on to. So certainly I can have a think about that and see if we could make that work. We could also potentially put something in there that asks the apprentices to share that email with their employer and with their line manager, which might be an alternative way of tackling that. But yeah, certainly we can give some thought to that, and it is slightly different. Certainly when we send the recording for this, I guess the other thing that I could do would be to get David and Victoria to attach a template of the email that goes out, so that at least you can see the communication that they will be getting in its template form, even if it isn't specific, if that would be helpful. So the last thing I guess that I was going to update on, which relates to those off-the-job training records and those smart assessor records, is that the ESFA always like to keep us on our toes with the rules and regulations and funding requirements around apprenticeships, and they have changed some of the terminology, the calculation base, and also the requirements for off-the-job training. So from September 2022, the method for calculating off-the-job training has changed slightly, and I think I updated at the last employer forum that for those of you that have apprentices that were on programme before the autumn 22 intake versus after the 22 intake, you will see a subtle difference, that the earlier ones are calculated as 20% off the job training, because it's calculated as 20% of their contracted hours with some complicated adjustments. After autumn 22, it got simplified. So it's essentially an average of 6 hours out of each working week. Their smart assessor record will therefore look slightly different depending which of those situations they're in. But what has not changed is that their commitment statement, their training plan, clearly states their off-the-job training hours. They know that those are the minimum number of training hours that they need to record over the course of their entire apprenticeship. So no particular number in any individual week, but as an average across their entire apprenticeship, they need to keep pace with those off-the-job hours. That's nothing new. What is slightly different is that the ESFA have also introduced a new requirement for every apprentice to be engaged in active learning with their training provider in every 4-week period. So in other words, for every calendar 4 weeks, the ESFA are expecting us to be able to evidence that each of your apprentices participated in some active learning with us in every individual 4-week period. Again, I'm not expecting that to cause them to have to do anything differently. I think one of the real assets that we've got that helps us with that is something called CPD Bites. So all of the apprentices are very aware that they have access to online CPD resources. They register for those. Access to that is through their virtual learning environment, their CIPFA page. It will then email them every week with a little 15-minute sector relevant update and access to a whole back catalogue of bites that they can do on other topics, everything from technical accounting content to perhaps softer management type stuff. So what we are telling them all is it's even more crucial, given the ESFA requirement for active learning in every 4-week period, for them to access those resources and to be keeping their off-the-job training record up to date. So they just need to be dropping into their record, ideally every week, and making sure that they record something that they have done. That could be college learning. It could be using some of the resources that go with that through Smart Assessor. They have access to all of their workbooks. We've got some recordings of additional resources in terms of practice questions on some of the things like PSFR, cash flow statements, those kind of difficult things, or indeed just one of these CPD bites. But we will be reinforcing that reminder, I guess, that off-the-job training record has to be kept up to date. We need to make sure that in every period the ESFA would be satisfied that we were using your funding in a compliant way. I think that's everything that I wanted to cover. Obviously, though, any more questions, I'm very happy to try and take.
Thanks, Helen. Sorry, there's just a question that came in from Martin about exam results and why we don't. Yep. So Martin, I believe the reason why they get the CIMA ones almost immediately will be because they're objectively tested, so multiple choice. And obviously ours, apart from the first couple, they require human marking, and then they go through a validation process, and then it goes to an exam panel to actually verify or validate the results. So whether with the new exam system that will help reduce the time is something we can perhaps ask Anna. That's why actually Anna can't make today's meeting, because there's our formal exam panel, which are made up from CIPFA qualified members that actually go through the results and validate them before we release them. So it's a question we can certainly ask Anna. Are there plans to kind of speed up the results with the new exam system? But that may take a while before that can happen. But thanks for the question, Martin. Okay,
yeah,
so
I mean, certainly the pragmatic answer at the moment is we put all of our exam results through the exam panel. So the exam panel is meeting today to ratify the results that will be issued on Thursday, and all of the modules from FA, MA onwards go through that same process. And I think Anna would probably say it's kind of part of the robustness of the checks of the approach taken to exam marking and the consistency, etc., that even the exams that are auto-marked by the system in terms of an objective question, the exam panel will still be looking at, the mechanisms in place to moderate that marking, to check consistency on standard of exam, etc. So I think that would be her answer, and that would be the rationale for that, Martin.
But yeah, we do take your point, Martin, and I think particularly when you've got exams quarterly now, and if students, unfortunately are not successful, actually then they've only got sort of 5 weeks. Bless you. Only got 5 weeks before the next exam sitting. So that's why, as Helen was saying, our apprenticeship team will talk to students individually about what their plans are, and depending on whether it was a narrow fail or not, whether they should do the resit in March. Hi Sarah. Yes, no problem at all, Sarah. We can get you results for any employer. We can send them to you. So Sarah, I'll make a note of that, and we'll send you results as soon as possible on Thursday. And again, if anyone else needs results for your students, there is an automated system we have, but that isn't always accessible on the results day. So if anyone else has, just pop a message in the box or send us a message directly, and we'll get that to you as well. Okay, I've got one more just brief update. We've sort of spoken about it, I think, briefly as well. It's just really just to remind you all that the deadline for apprenticeship applications for the spring term actually closes at the end of this month. It does come around rather quickly. So just to let you know, so if anyone has got, all we need to know is just their name and contact details, and that means you'll meet that deadline of the end of this month. And then the following one will open up enrolments again. The deadline will be the end of July for the courses starting in September. So that was just the final reminder that I wanted to give you. Okay, so that allows us some time, perhaps not as much time as I originally had planned, just for any more questions. So very happy for people just to unmute themselves and ask a question live, or you can put a question in your chat box. And Amina, I've made a note for you to get results for you as well on Thursday.
So David, we have a question that I was just typing an answer to, but it'll be far quicker if I just talk. So it's about the apprenticeship portfolio in Smart Assessor. And the simple answer is that portfolio approach, that endpoint assessment with the project report questions based on a portfolio that's kept in that Smart Assessor ePortfolio system, that actually is exclusively for apprentices. It's part of the endpoint assessment that constitutes the finishing line for an apprenticeship. So if you have students who are non-apprentices, they in fact definitely do not and cannot use that Smart Assessor portfolio or do that methodology of assessment at the end, the answering of the project report questions, and they will access membership by completing the traditional PEP, and CIPFA within Anna's team on the examination side have a membership manager who can deal directly with advising them on that approach. But no, it's kind of a binary choice. You're an apprentice, you do Smart Assessor, portfolio and project report as your endpoint assessment. You're not an apprentice, you still do the traditional PEP approach.
Amina, you've got your hand up. Would you want to unmute yourself and ask a question?
Hi, thank you very much. My question related to the off-the-job training records that we touched upon just briefly, saying how they changed post-autumn 2022. But to be honest, the change sounds a lot simpler than what my current apprentice has, and we really struggle to manage that. Is there a way that we can migrate across to the new system of recording 6 hours per week?
Hi, Amina. So in a nutshell, the answer is no, because the ESFA rules are not applied retrospectively. But in essence, I don't think it should be making very much difference at all to the way in which a learner is actually recording their off-the-job training, or an apprentice is recording their off-the-job training. All the 6 hours a week does is just an average that generates an overall number. That number is the minimum number of off-the-job training hours that the apprentice has to record across the duration of their entire apprenticeship. So whether that number is calculated using the old 20% formula, or whether it's calculated using the new average of 6 hours per working week, shouldn't really, from that point forward, make any difference. Either way, we've calculated the total number required for your individual apprentice, and that total number is recorded in their training plan. So that's the thing we used to call a commitment statement, but the training plan that all three parties, the apprentice, the employer, and we, have signed at the beginning. That minimum number then goes into the Smart Assessor system, so they can see what the number is, they know what the target is, and irrespective of how that number was calculated, our recommendation is that every week, but certainly regularly, they drop into the Smart Assessor system, they make an entry of anything they've done that week that they want to count as off-the-job training, and the system will keep a running total, a comparison of what they've recorded against the minimum, the target that they've got to get to. All the change has done is change the way in which we calculate the target. It hasn't changed what they need to record, how they should be recording it, or the fact that it doesn't have to be 6 hours in each individual week even now. That's just the average, the methodology used to come up with the target number. What they actually record is what they've actually done, and the only requirement is they've got to hit the minimum by the end of their apprenticeship, and they've got to show that they've done something which counts as active learning in every 4-week period during the course of their apprenticeship. Does that help, Amina? So the simple answer is no, I'm afraid we can't port them, but actually I don't think it should be making much difference to how they're finding it in pragmatic terms. So if they're struggling, then one of the things that we could do is jump on a Teams call with you and them, and we can talk through what it is they should be capturing as their off-the-job training, and make sure that they feel really clear and comfortable with A, what it is, and B, where it should be going.
No, thank you. That is really helpful. I guess from my point of view, recording 20% in our workplace equates to just over 7 hours. So there's always a little bit of a shortage. We're always hovering around the 17-18% mark.
Yeah.
Particularly when the student has to do resits, because resits aren't always funded by ourselves. So in those kind of months, we really do struggle to hit that target. But when I was looking at the 6 hours, that obviously makes a bit more of a difference. But I understand if the rules can't be applied retrospectively.
Yeah, and the reality is that the 20% was calculated after various other things were adjusted for, holiday and all sorts of things. And so what we're finding is that the target number is not coming out as a very different number. So I think even if your apprentice had their number calculated before versus after the change in the ESFA rules, the total target you'd be looking for actually wouldn't be very different. I suspect that often apprentices aren't capturing everything that could count as off-the-job training. So the most obvious thing is obviously college tuition or any time that you give them for study leave or revision, and that potentially includes resits if that's applicable within the organisation, but it differs from organisation to organisation. But that said, there is a lot of other opportunity to add to the off-the-job training record. Every time they shadow somebody in a new task, every time they look at guidance, legislation, last year's working papers, every time they sit down with a more experienced member of staff who is developing their understanding of the application of any of these aspects of either the knowledge or the skills or the behaviours in the workplace belongs in their off-the-job training record. And what we tend to find is that apprentices find it perhaps trickier to identify some of those less obvious and more work-related areas of off-the-job training. And it's also very easy for those to get forgotten, that you think in the moment when you perhaps, because it can be something like attending a meeting they perhaps don't really need to be at, but they're there to watch and learn. And at the time they think, oh, I'll remember that and I'll put it in my off-the-job training record. But it's quite easy as time moves on for that to sort of get missed and forgotten, which is why I think the crucial thing is that they update it really regularly, actually, and are just asking themselves, certainly at least every week, did I do anything this week which was given to me at work as an opportunity for me to see something for the first time, develop my understanding of something, or even see somebody in action demonstrating a level of competence in the skills and behaviours of communication or leadership or problem solving and decision making at a level that I don't yet have full competence in, but I was watching and learning, and I was being given access to the chances to see how that should be done by a professional accountant or finance manager. It's those sorts of things, Amina, that I suspect are perhaps a bit underrepresented in their off-the-job training record and would help you to boost that total. Does that help, or have I just wildly confused the issue?
No, not at all. That's really, really helpful. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Amina, for the question. Okay, so there was just Laura just asked about will results for the case study and the EPA come out on the same day. Yeah, all the results now come out on the same day, so all the results will come out on Thursday. So fingers crossed, Laura, for your student going through EPA. Yeah, Liam, got your request, so thank you for that.
Yeah, so all the EPA results will come out on the same day, and I suppose the only other thing I could add to that, just for information in case anyone isn't fully aware of it, is that they will get two separate results, one for case study and one for project report. Obviously what we're hoping for is that they've passed both, in which case they will get an invitation to full membership from the Institute. If, however, they have passed one but not the other, then the component that they've passed is theirs to keep for 12 months. So let's say, for example, that they had passed their project report but had not been successful in their case study, then they would have 4 further exam sittings in which to resit just the case study while retaining their project report pass for that period. So we would be talking to them then about resitting their case study. We would put them on revision to look at the advanced material for that next case study sitting, etc. So the same process would kick in for an endpoint assessment candidate. If they had been unsuccessful in either part, the apprenticeship team would open a conversation with them about, okay, what we're going to do about this, when would you want to resit the component that you need to tackle again, and they would keep the element that they had passed. So hopefully that makes sense as well, but of course, any questions, just shout.
Okay, I think that's everyone's question. So I'm probably just going to finish the meeting now. So just really to say thanks everyone so much for attending